didn't end. It got rebranded like everything else the communist Marxists do. But Cathy O'Brien, the one thing I do want to say about her, she was sold to the CIA when she was 3 years old. She'll tell you the story and everything that happened. But the one thing I want to tell you about today and about Cathy O'Brien is that if Cathy O'Brien can heal, every one of these children can heal. And I don't want people to think that these kids are damaged goods, because I hear that. How can you ever heal? Well, Cathy O'Brien can heal, anyone can heal, and she also has a whole book, PTSD, A Time to Heal, that has helped many, many children heal as well. So Angela sent me up here because Cathy and I are very close, but I just want you to know the story of Cathy O'Brien is the story of probably every child right now in our school system. They're using what they learned on her and thousands of other kids and adults and people that they put through LSD experiments and all kinds of evil stuff. You can look it up, CIA Mind Wars Declassified from the US military, and it'll tell you real quick some evil stuff done especially by the CIA to create human robots. And Cathy O'Brien was one of them for 30 years, and a great man named Mark Phillips saved her and saved us and saved me. And thank you so much, Cathy O'Brien. You are my hero, and I'm so grateful you're here today. Please know, this woman, but for the grace of God, she was not supposed to survive. She was on her way to not surviving, and God stepped in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, all the workers and supporters and everyone who's made this event happen. For the children's sake, we need to raise awareness. Thank you all for being here and being part of this. This is an amazing time to be alive and live our life's purpose, because there's a lot that needs to change. Nobody's going to do it for us. It's up to us all. And we need to arm ourselves with truth. I'm a survivor of CIA, MK Ultra mind control. Mind control is the common thread that's weaving through society's woes, from our education system to everything that we're seeing today. Because mind control is being used to usher in what Adolf Hitler, George Bush, and Joe Biden term the New World Order. And their funding mechanism is drug and human trafficking across open borders. I know because when I was born in 1957 to a multi-generational incest-based family, I was targeted for MK Ultra mind control. My father had been sexually abusing me from infancy, and he was trafficking me to my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge. At that Blue Masonic Lodge were a lot of politicians, law enforcement, people in the communities that get placed in high positions if they're part of this secret society. Well, we need to know what those secrets are, and the secrets are about mind control. Knowledge is our defense against it, and I certainly didn't have any defense against it when my father was sexually abusing me. But my brain knew what he was doing was wrong, and it actually shut down neuron pathways in my brain, compartmentalized that memory of his abuse. That's called repressed memory. It's what happens. It's how our brains respond to trauma. There's so many people that are dealing with repressed memory now because of the same function within our brain. Since I couldn't judge what my father was doing was wrong, and my brain did that for me, it actually shut down those neuron pathways so the rest of my mind could function normally as though nothing had happened. And then as he trafficked me to my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge, more neuron pathways shut down in my brain, and I began losing some of my free thought. This kind of dissociation, this dissociative identity disorder that I was developing is exactly what trauma is used for in mind control. Not only was my father trafficking me, he was using me in child pornography. And that was back in the day of the big reels. I mean, it's still the child pornography was going on. And my dad was caught sending child pornography through the U.S. mails. One of the local politicians at my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge approached my father and told him he could receive immunity from prosecution if he would agree to sell me into MK Ultra mind control. My father thought it was a great idea, but consider that. This was like 1960, and already our courts were corrupted to allow for pedophilia to proliferate. Why would that be? And why was this being kept secret? It's because the Hitler-Himmler research had found that the formula for mind control, whether it's of an individual like me, or of a nation, or of the world, the formula is exactly the same, and it begins with trauma. Trauma is the basis of mind control. That's why we are experiencing trauma after trauma after trauma. It's happening to all of us. What happened to me is affecting us all on a grand scale. So this local politician was actively involved in the CIA's MK Ultra project because the information on Hitler-Himmler research had come over in Project Paperclip. Do a little research on that. You'll see that the Nazi and fascist scientists were imported into the U.S. in the wake of World War II. World War II was not won. It was transferred here along with the information on mind control for ushering in this one world government, this new world order slave society agenda. They knew people wouldn't cooperate with it, and they needed to use mind control to usher it in. That's what we need to know, is that mind control is a sliding scale from the kind of traumatic, MK Ultra, torturous mind control that I experienced and was used on a White House Pentagon level, primarily during the 1980s. That is the same formula that is a sliding scale right on down to information control. Again, knowledge is our defense against mind control. They don't want us to have that information. They didn't want us to have our defense against mind control. They hid pertinent information on mind-brain function, our birthright information. That information on how our brain compartmentalizes memory, all of that was kept out of mental health. It was kept out of society as a whole. It was kept out of the medical community. All this information was suppressed under national security. The 1947 National Security Act has been their blanket and cover-up of pertinent information and their secret agenda for mind control of a nation. And at the same time that the National Security Act was formed, the CIA was formed. They have been actively involved in implementing and carrying forth what this mind control of a nation, and it's been slowly creeping in ever since. Well, this local politician that granted my father immunity from prosecution was Gerald Ford. That's the same Gerald Ford that went on to become the unelected president of the United States. As Gerald Ford's political career escalated, so too did my victimization in MK Ultra mind control until I was used on a White House and Pentagon level. I was trafficked and I was used in black ops. I was trafficked to various government leaders and drug lords that were involved in MK Ultra mind control. The ones that were involved in this New World Order agenda. And Gerald Ford was placed in the office of president as a reward for covering up the Kennedy assassination. That is when this New World Order took a strong hold, because that was an event that traumatized the nation. While the nation was traumatized, it's like our conscious mind freezes in fright and leaves our subconscious mind wide open to being easily led and manipulated. And we look outside ourselves. We've been conditioned for generations to look outside ourselves, Tell us what happened. Fix this for us. Who did this? What's going on? And Ford gave us that one bullet theory and diverted our attention. When Gerald Ford was put in the office of president, we'll notice we got the same handful of perpetrators, same handful of puppet masters, of New World Order conspirators that in his cabinet. It's a small handful of people with a very dark agenda. And they're using a media voice to appear like there's more of them there are to make us feel helpless. It's just a handful of them. Look at Ford's cabinet. He had George Bush as head of the CIA. He has Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Henry Kissinger, Rockefeller, and he had Jack Valenti, head of the Motion Picture Association of America, as his press secretary. Jack Valenti gave us the conspiracy theory. Anybody who questioned the narrative of the media was called a conspiracy theorist. Research it for yourself. That's when it started. That's when people were conditioned to not ask any questions that was different than what the controlled media narrative was. They gained control of the media then. They gained control over the minds of the masses. They gained control over our information. And I was right there in the midst of it in Washington, D.C., among these perpetrators. And just like the secret societies that place people in high positions in communities that are complicit, that know the secrets, they were placing people in key positions, head of the FBI, head of the CIA, infiltrating our government through rigged elections. Research for yourself and you'll find that electronic voting machines came into being in the wake of the Kennedy assassination. Well, I was in Washington, D.C. among these perpetrators that are ushering in this new world order and have us in this position that we're in today. And they didn't worry about elections. They knew that they were going to be placed. They knew the elections were rigged and that they were going to be put in positions as long as they cooperated with the New World Order agenda. What I witnessed and experienced during those years among these perpetrators like the Bushes and Clintons, my 1995 testimony for Congress, Transformation of America, it's back there on the table. I have preserved that information so that you can know the truth. If national security hadn't been invoked on that information, we would have known what was coming. We would have known what mind control entails and had our defense against it. We would have known not to follow the media narrative and to look to big government to fix this problem for us. They are not going to fix it for us. They're doing it to us. It's up to us. Each and every one of us. And the most important message that I want to share with you today is that our children have been targeted very deliberately and conditioned. Their information has been completely altered in education to promote the New World Order. And they have been indoctrinated to accept information in. Very fortunately for me, very fortunately for us all, Mark Phillips, who is an intelligence insider working the highest levels of intelligence mind sciences, was very, very outraged, to say the least, to see little children being taken in and out of the White House. The children were being used in a pedophile agenda, not only for mind control purposes, but also for blackmail purposes, to compromise certain politicians and judges to allow for ushering in this New World Order. He was disgusted to see how the Hitler-Himmler research had found that the most horrific trauma on the human mind is sexual abuse of a child prior to age 5, or any time while their brain is still forming. That's why we have the pedophile agenda being pushed so hard. That's why we have this so-called transgender agenda being pushed so hard. It is a mind control agenda. And knowledge is our defense against it. Once we realize that, we can start protecting our children. We can rise up. It's up to each and every one of us to go into our local school systems and make sure that the children aren't being indoctrinated. It's not gender confusion. It's identity confusion because of the trauma that they have been subjected to, because of the way their minds are being manipulated in the education system. Mark Phillips decided he was going to do something about it. He wasn't the only one in intelligence who wanted to make a difference, but he's the one who in 1988 decided to take action. And he rescued my daughter and me right out of the Washington, D.C. human trafficking swamp. And he handed me keys to my own mind. He had found information on our mind-brain function buried under national security. He couldn't release it back into the population because he was bound by laws of sedition. But he could hand those keys to me and remind me that it is within us all to heal. I had been programmed and tortured and systematically conditioned for decades. I had been programmed on various military, NASA, and DARPA installations. And still, it was within me to heal. Because we have all been blessed with that ability. It's our innate birthright. It's our ability to deal with any level of mind control, any level of trauma that we've experienced, we can heal. We can heal from information control. We can expand our thinking beyond the media bombardment and understand that repetitiveness is the most basic form of mind control, especially after trauma happens. Like when mind control masked as a virus was unleashed on a global population in order to force in this new world order. They had to hurry and rush because they were a little behind time. Hillary Clinton was supposed to have ushered in the New World Order 2016. But there's so many of us awake and aware that we overrode the rigged algorithm and electronic voting machine. So they went all in with mind control. And they masked up our children. Masks inhibit oxygen to the brain necessary for critical analysis-free thought. They depersonalize. They cause personalization confusion, identity confusion that they're now calling gender confusion. It's a lie, but they knew exactly what they were doing. Plus, all of us felt like we had no voice because we couldn't speak to each other, especially from 6 feet away. Very deliberate for ushering in this new world order, and elections were blatantly stolen right in front of all of us. And so many people are awake and aware. One of the things that Mark taught me when he rescued me from my MK Ultra victimization was to write out my memory. Because just like my brain compartmentalized it when I was an infant automatically, my brain knew I was safe for the first time. So those neuron pathways started opening and I began remembering. And he told me, write out what you're seeing. So I began writing. He said, do it with a pen and paper. Typing doesn't do the same thing. So I began writing, because when you move a pen, it uses the logic part of the brain necessary for critical analysis-free thought. Everyone, consider that as you are dealing with trauma today. When you feel immobilized and overwhelmed by what's going on, pick up a pen and paper. Write out what's immobilizing you. Write out what your fear is. And then add a solution. Because Mark taught me, voice no negatives without a solution. I had followed orders and been tortured to carry out the bidding of these perpetrators for over 30 years. I didn't know how to think for myself. But if I wasn't allowed to just sit around and complain about what I'd experienced and I had to think of a solution instead, it forced my brain to fire in new ways. And I learned to think. I learned to think free. And I realize it's within us all to come up with those solutions. So when you're writing out whatever's holding you back, add a solution. What that'll do is make your brain fire in new ways. Not only is the logic part of your brain activated, but you're opening neuron pathways above and beyond trauma to lift you above the storm so you get a clear path forward and can see what it is that we can do. It makes all the difference in the world. And one of the things we can do is teach our children that and hand them a pen and paper. Get writing by hand back into the school system and put the information out there that it is within us all to heal. And that's the most important message that I can give going forward. As we deal with this human trafficking issue, as awareness comes to light and we all start recognizing it around us and making a positive difference, healing is possible. The methods that I used are available back there too in PTSD Time to Heal. They're posted on my website. They're secured there in ebook form at trance-formation.com. You pick up one of my cards back there, look there, get that information, apply it to yourself, and you'll find that this dark energy force cabal feeds off of negativity. They feed off of fear, hatred, trauma, negativity, and division. Love is what they fear. The strength of the human spirit is their greatest fear. And when we reclaim our free thought, we reclaim our ability to access our strength of spirit. It's an infinite source of strength. And live the love that we are. When we live the love that we are untouchable. And as soon as we all reclaim that, it's our victory. It's game over. It's where we win and where they lose, and they know that. Love is the answer. Truth makes us free. Arm yourself with the knowledge that is our defense against mind control, and protect our children.
Amen.
Thank you.
Everyone to know that there's been a documentary made about Cathy's life called Trance, and you can get that back there as well or online. And thank you so much, Cathy. I could not love you more. She is 100% proof. No matter what happened to you, God can heal you, and you can come out full of love and light and help people going forward. She helps so many people. It's amazing. Thank you, Cathy O'Brien. The next speaker, many of you might have seen her testify last week in front of Congress. She is a total hero and a friend of mine. And I gotta say, last week she came on my show and we both cried. But we cried also because it's finally coming out. Children are going to now be saved because of this woman's fearlessness. Her and another whistleblower at DHS came out and they were not afraid of losing their jobs. They were more afraid of losing children. So I got to tell you, Tara Rodas is a hero right now in America. She is just getting started, and she's here today to tell you exactly what's going on at the border. Thank you, my friend. Such a hero. Get used to her face.
Wow. Wow. I just cannot tell you what an honor and a privilege it is for me to be standing here today. And I can tell you, I never imagined that I would be standing here today in 2021 when I opened my computer and I saw an advertisement to all federal employees that said, hey, we need your help with the crisis on the southern border. If you're a federal employee, we're asking you to volunteer to leave your agency and go serve with Health and Human Services to reunite children with sponsors here in the United States. And I thought to myself, my husband, who is from El Salvador, I'm a Spanish speaker. Mi español no es perfecto, pero yo puedo hablar. I can talk right in Spanish, and I thought, you know, how many federal employees can actually speak Spanish? How many federal employees would be able to help the children? And so I made a decision to apply to go to the border to do what I thought was to help place children in loving homes. That's what I thought. And a lot of other federal employees did the same thing. We wanted to help. So I get mobilized to Pomona, California, and I was at the Pomona Fairplex, if you've had the opportunity to see any of the exposés, but over 8,000 children were processed through that facility in less than 6 months. So 8,000 children were sent to homes in less than 6 months. Now, if you can imagine, I mean, how much vetting process or how much investigation can go into sending children to a home when you're sending that many in that little amount of time, right? Does that make sense to anybody? Right. So when we started looking into some of these cases, it was very strange that a person would be applying for a child, and then we discover, well, that person has applied for several children. And then we started to discover that, well, there are 40 children or 50 children in an apartment complex. Well, how could that be if they're going to be with their family members, right? I mean, that doesn't make sense to anybody. And then we're looking into some cases, and we're finding that there are, in some places in Houston, Texas. Is anybody here from Texas? Great state of Texas? Okay, hey, Texas people. Okay, we found that there's a place, and right over there too, there's a place in Houston, Texas that has over 350 children that have been released from this program in less than a 3-mile radius. So, I am not an investigator. I'm not a data analyst, but I do have a little common sense. And I thought, that doesn't pass the common sense test, right? So, what I think is important to note, because this story is not about me, but there is one thing that I think would be important for you to know, is that I've been a federal employee for more than 20 years. I consider it a high honor to serve in the United States government. I consider it a privilege to be able to spend my career helping other people, and that 17 of those years have been spent in the Inspector General community. And in the IG community, if you know anything about the Inspector General community, in the IG community, we combat fraud, waste, and abuse. That's what we do. The Inspector General community would not even exist if there was no fraud in the government, because that's all we look at is fraud, waste, and abuse. That's what we do. Now, tonight, I want to make sure I'm very clear. I'm not speaking to you right now on behalf of the Inspector General community or my job there. What I'm speaking to you on behalf is what I witnessed when my agency gave me the permission to go help Health and Human Services reunite children. And what I found is that they're not reuniting these children with families. So it can be a very hard leap for people to understand trafficking of children. This is looking into a very dark subject. For those of you who work in this area, I'm so humbled that so many people have been in this fight for so long. So many of you sitting here are heroes. And I think that the reason it's hard for people to think about child trafficking is that, as other people have mentioned, people want to say this is a conspiracy theory. But let me just ask you, just raise your hand. Does anybody think there's a thing called drug trafficking? Anybody think so? Yep, that's what I thought. Okay. Anybody think there's a thing as gun trafficking, right? Okay, see, smart people here. Everybody told me when I was gonna sign up to come here, there's gonna be a lot of smart people here. Now, what if I told you with drug trafficking, it's a one-time use, okay, one-time use. So let's pretend, and I know you would never do this, but let's pretend you're trafficking drugs from Guatemala. So you're manufacturing your drugs in Guatemala. You then have to get your drugs all the way across Mexico. That means you've got to somehow use the cartel, pay them off in order to get to the US border. Then you may have seen shows where we actually have law enforcement on the border who catch some of those drugs, right? So the trafficker with his drugs, he loses some of his product as he gets over the border. But then that drug trafficker still, he's got to guard his product all the way down his distribution chain. That drug trafficker has to guard his product to his end user so that he can make as much money as he possibly can off of a one-time use. Okay. Now I want you to think about a child and why it is more profitable for these unscrupulous people to traffic children. Okay, so now let's pretend we're in Guatemala. And I love the Guatemalan people. I've been there, okay? I've traveled extensively in El Salvador and Mexico, and I love the Guatemalan people, which is why I'm very horrified about what I'm about to share with you. So imagine you're the child trafficker now in Guatemala. The only thing you have got to do is get to the US border. That's it. Because once you get your child to the US border, you then turn your child, your product, understand these people view a child as an asset. It is a commodity to them. It is income that they will be able to earn, and that's how they view it. And that's a wicked thing. It's a wicked thing to know people view it that way. But once all they have to do is get their product to the border. Once they get their product to the border, the United States government at Health and Human Services, Office of Refugee Resettlement, takes the child. Then, with your tax dollars, the Office of Refugee Resettlement sends that child. Everybody remember, you were hearing about those midnight flights that were going on. There were airplanes going all around the country. Nobody could find out who were on the manifests of these flights. Well, they were children that your tax dollars were flying to sponsors. So your tax dollars, not the trafficker now, right? So the trafficker has built in the United States government into their business plan. These traffickers are smart. They're about making money. And they say, well, if the United States government is gonna guard my product over the border, and the United States government is gonna guard my product, and the United States government is going to deliver my product directly to my end user, the trafficker says, that's a pretty good deal for me. It's a pretty good deal for me. Now, if that was the end of the story, that would be bad enough. I think we could all agree that's not what we want our tax dollars going to. But friends, what is the most horrible part of this is that the person who gets the child on the end, it's not a one-time use. When a child is delivered to a sponsor, they get to use the child over and over and over again. I cannot stress this enough. This is a horrible, dark well to begin to look into. And some people will say, well, Tara, how do you know that's true? How do you know they're using the kids like that? Well, anybody read the New York Times lately? I wouldn't consider the New York Times to be like a right-wing conspiracy newspaper. I don't know about you, but that's not what I think of when I think of the New York Times. But if you've been following a reporter at the New York Times, Hannah Dreier, you will see the reporting that she's done about these children who are not only working here, but dying here. These children are working in slaughterhouses. They are working overnight shifts. They are working in warehouses and all kinds of dangerous jobs where not only are these kids working here, they're dying here. And that's because their sponsors are putting them to work. The sponsors are not like, wow, welcome to the United States. You're gonna get to go to school now. You're gonna get to learn the language. We're gonna assimilate you into our society and really give you this great opportunity. These children, most of them have to quit school to pay their debt to the cartels. And people might say, is that believable? But did anybody see James O'Keefe and Project Veritas's expose on this? Okay. So the children say, when they go knock on the door, what's happening to you? The children are saying, I'm being pimped out by my sponsor in the house where I'm living. My sponsor is telling me that she's my aunt, but I don't know, I've never met her. Other children, I've had to quit my job. Go to school. I can't go to school anymore because I have to pay my debt to the cartel. There are sponsors who have received 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 children. How is this possible? Now, what's another very interesting thing to me that I did not know before I deployed to help this mission is that the Department of Health and Human Services is a $2.7 trillion agency. They actually get 1/5 of the entire budget of the United States. So the entire budget. So I know a lot of you have been in the CPS fight for a while. That's also Department of Health and Human Services. So they get 1/5 of the budget. Now, how is it that if you get 1/5 of the budget that you cannot care for children? How is that possible? I think there are questions that we really need to start asking. And seeing people here like this, it's just so, it gives me such hope, because one voice makes a difference. And your voice can make a difference. If you know my story, then you heard that a whistleblower, I know I can't say former Marine because you're never a former Marine, right? But a Marine who worked for the Department of Homeland Security started to see in early 2021 that these children, their sponsors, so-called sponsors, were members of transnational criminal organizations that were actually on something called the TOC watch list, which is transnational organized crime. Okay, see, these are bad people. These are not people that we want to be having in the United States, right? We have to put them on a watch list, but that we're actually giving children to them. So Aaron Stevenson is a hero. And what happened to Aaron for coming forward to say, hey, we're giving children to known dangerous criminals? Well, he was canceled, he was silenced, he was censored, he's no longer employed with Department of Homeland Security. But what Aaron did with his voice is, when his story aired, I was sitting on the Pomona Fairplex, emergency intake site, looking at cases. And I hear him say, hey, transnational organized criminals are getting these children. And I thought, oh my goodness, how could this get any worse than it already is? And when I started looking and sharing the information around the site, I found that yes, indeed, we actually had the case on our site of a known MS-13 affiliated person who was sponsoring a child from our site and simultaneously trying to get a child from the Fort Bliss emergency intake site. So I thought, this is absolutely unbelievable that the government, knowing full well we're giving children to criminal actors, is still sending children to criminal actors. Now, some people might say, well, Tara, okay, understand this is a terrible thing. Children are being labor trafficked, children are being sex trafficked. But, in the end, how does this affect my life? In the end, I want to make sure that when you leave here, that in addition to knowing the horrors of what's happening to these vulnerable children on your tax dollar, that it affects you because you have children who go to school with these children. who are being trafficked by these sponsors. So, you have a birthday party for one of your kids, and you invite the kids in the neighborhood over, and you might not realize that one of the kids who's at this party is one of these girls who's actually been trafficked here for sex. And she is responsible for recruiting other people into the group that's being trafficked for sex. Now, the other thing that I didn't mention was the woman who was the sponsor, who was MS-13 related, woman, female. A lot of times the traffickers of the children are women. So you're thinking, I'm having the birthday party and this child is coming over of this single mom, and you're starting to build relationships, and you don't realize you're building relationship with a high-level criminal actor who is after your child. People do not understand. There are a lot of situations where they're using these children once they bring them here and they put them into these operations, that their next step is to go after your children as well. Now, even if that wasn't the case, even if they were not targeting your kids, the fact that there's one United States cent, 1 penny that is spent to lure children here to what they believe is a better life, lure them here, and we take them into our custody, and then we fly them to people who abuse them for labor trafficking, sex trafficking, and other unspeakable things, is unacceptable. And this is why I'm saying one voice makes a difference. You can begin to ask your local legislators, where are the children? Where is the money that's being, how are you all spending this money that we're giving you to protect the children? I see you're flying the kids around on late night flights to so-called sponsors. What I want to know is, where are the children and are they safe? What's happening to these children? These are your tax dollars. These are government programs that you have every right to ask about. And there is, I understand, there is a lot of censorship, right? Lately, when Schellenberger and Taibbi went before the Weaponization Committee. Did anybody hear that by any chance? Okay. These are not what we would consider like right-wing conspiracy theorists, right? But they are discredited. Anyone who does not follow the narrative that the government knows best is considered a conspiracy theorist. They should put on a tinfoil hat, but you can look at the data. I would encourage people, get informed. Understand how the government is actually spending your money. I mean, if you go on the Office of Refugee Resettlement site, you can see where these kids are going. You can see how many of them actually came into your district or into your city, your zip code. But what's interesting is they don't tell you who those sponsors are, but these are great things to be able to ask your legislator. Well, who are the sponsors of these kids? What do we know about them? Are they criminal actors? So these are all things that I think together, if we start asking these questions, they're going to have to start giving answers. So I found it very interesting in the congressional hearing that the former person from Office of Refugee Resettlement, Mr. Carey, admitted that the people doing these vetting, supposed vetting of sponsors, they're not law enforcement and they're not investigative. So who would, in their right mind, give a child to anyone they have not investigated or looked into their background? This does not make sense, right? This does not make sense. So I could go on for hours and hours, but I know that we want to bring up the panel so that you have the opportunity to ask questions. But I do want to say that there are children today who are in crisis. Today, right now, just like I said before Congress, there are children who are working overnight shifts right now. They are being labor trafficked. They are being abused on their jobs. They're working dangerous jobs around bone crushers. Some children are dying on the job. There are stories of children being killed by falling off an earth mover, you know, a teen. We've got middle schoolers who are getting chemical burns, working in slaughterhouses. We have teens who've fallen off roofs their first week here in the United States. This is unacceptable. And one voice, your voice, can make a difference. Today, there are children who are being sold for sex. Your voice can make a difference. So I just thank you all so much. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to be here today. Seeing so many people concerned about this issue gives me hope, because there is hope. We can start asking the questions, we can get the answers, and these are things that can change the life of a child and change the life of potentially the children in your own home if they get recruited into any of this bad activity. So thank you all for just everything that you're doing in this fight. I'm just humbled to be a part of this crowd. I give everybody who put this conference together just 5 gold stars for what they're doing. And I just have to say, I give God thanks for helping me walk this path all this time. And my husband thanks for standing by me and helping me through this hard time. So thank you all. Go out and use your voice to make a difference.
You are my hero. Thank you so much for going out there on Capitol Hill amongst the wolves. Thank you for doing that. We love you. We appreciate you. And really, it helped us because we've been trying to get this truth out there, and this has really brought it to the forefront. So it can't really call it a conspiracy theory anymore. So we're going to do our Q&A. So we have some questions for them. I wanted to make sure that you guys knew Liz Crokin wanted to be here today, and she unfortunately fell sick, and we just want to pray for her at the end because she really wanted to be here, and of course she's done so much. If you guys don't know about her video series, Angela, tell me the name of the video series.